Oh. All right, hello, I'm Robert Salem, part of the Potter and I always say it wrong. Potter and Sculptors Club, and I'm going to give a demonstration on decorating with slip. So I'll start at the end in a sense. So I've got some pieces here, just some examples of some of the things I've done where I've used really a lot of slip, and we'll get into it shortly. But putting this on not just to build a structure, but actually to add accent to it. It really helps, especially when you start working with various glazes that will break. So I did bring this as an example of, this is the woo woo blue, but you can see some of those edges where it starts to break on that, and it's really something I like to see. I wish I had a couple better examples at really showing the breaking. Some of these these two pieces in the dark brown are unglazed, so that really gives you an idea of what putting the slip on with the various tools can do, and the texture on it that you'll get. Obviously when you glaze it, some of that texture does get covered over, but it'll come back. When you get close enough, you can see some of the shadows. The glaze will break on it and rest in different places, and it just kind of adds something to it. I probably started using this about 3 years ago, so most of the work I did, I would just do a straight piece, no extra texture, and glaze it and just move on from there. And I started to experiment a lot more with the texture and really got into it, and that's mainly what I want to show today.
Why did my texture fall off? It was...
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit, and the main thing is to make sure that your pieces are leather hard. So you can see the flexibility. This is starting to collapse, but it's still got enough moisture to hold its structure for the shape you want, and accept slip like this. I've never had a problem with anything when I add the slip to it of it cracking or falling off. And I haven't done anything to slow down the drying that much. Once I put the texture on, I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to put a bag over it because it will ruin what I've done. And I just leave it in the house 75 degrees, and it dries over a couple of days to the touch. And like I said, I've never had a problem with it cracking or coming off. But we can talk a little bit more about that. I experimented last week with using some of these colored slips, and I'm going to try that tonight on these vessels, so we'll do that on the wheel. But most of this slip is just applied by hand. I've got various tools I use, mostly like the metal ribs, and even this little tool that I like to use. This, you can see the rough edges, so it gives me some nice texture. We'll take a look at what that is. But some of my favorites have been chunks of wood. Literally wood I've cut or broken off that have these rough edges. Pass that around. And in fact, all these pieces in here were done by that and the metal rib here. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, getting the structure to a leather hard stage. I created this last week and just kept it in the bag, so it's still moist enough to accept the slip without cracking. And then some of these pieces where I'll just do individual different textures on it, and we'll kind of walk through that. The slip, what I've mostly been working with is WSO. So obviously I want to match the clay that I'm making with the slips, so I'll just take excess WSO that I'm working on and throw them in these containers. In fact, I brought a whole bunch in that people can take if they want to, for...
You eat a lot of ice cream.
I do, and I was going to mention that. If any of you have trouble eating the ice cream, let me know. I'll finish the ice cream for you and give you back an ice cream jar. No problem with that. So let's see. So when you're building structure, you're using slip. You're creating pieces and essentially gluing them together with slip, and it's really not any different. What I like to do is get it to a pretty thick state, so you can see it's kind of like a creamy peanut butter. But you can see like this little piece I just whipped out there, how it's hanging on. So once I get a shape, if I have it really thick and it does some kind of whip up like that, it'll hold like that. I mean, if I shake it, this thing will probably fall to the ground, but it's just enough to hold the structure, but wet enough for me to work. As I start to apply the slip, I'm going to really just cake it on and continue to work around it. So while I'm getting the third and fourth side, that first side is already drying. And I've had slip that has been too thick that by the time I get there and come in with my tool, it's too dry and it starts to crack a little bit as I run through it, or it doesn't spread the way I want to see it spread. So it is critical to have it kind of creamy consistency. And anything I do here and show you and talk about, you just got to experiment on your own. And the tools that are going around, anything you find, you know, branches, pieces of wood. I'm always looking at things like that. I'll walk through a store with my wife and we're looking at different, you know, bowls or whatever, and she's looking at silverware and I'll see like a piece of silverware or something like, oh, I can make a shape out of that. So I'm always looking for that kind of thing.
Do you make your slip with vinegar or just water?
Just water. Just water and these.
But you really do beat it up.
I do. It's a bit of a workout. I have a small stick and I get water in there and I just keep turning it until it's creamy. So even though I've recycled the clay, I've got it soaking for several days and you've got chunks. They do break down, but you almost have to just keep working it until it's, I mean, that looks a little chunky, but it's, you know.
It's still water or just tap water? It's still water.
Oh, just tap water.
Oh.
I've never used distill. Is there an issue with the minerals in water in terms of how it reacts?
The previous teacher told us to do distill water.
Okay.
But I don't know the difference. What effect on that?
I'm not sure, other than I can imagine the minerals that are inside of in the water may react with the clay or the glaze, but I'm not sure. You can check with Ben or others that may know. Okay, so I'm just going to get started, start doing some of these pieces and kind of show you how I apply it. This is my favorite tool for putting it on. And I'm just, you know, dipping in and spreading it. So I like to get about, I don't know, an 1/8 inch thick. And I'll even use this rib if I feel impatient or I haven't eaten. And I'll just cake this on, keep spreading it through. And I'm not concerned with the lines that I'm creating now because I'm going to take those out or, you know, re-smooth those as I get going. But I do like to kind of evenly apply the slip. Like I said, about an 1/8 inch all the way across. Making sure I'm really getting the edges. One thing that's nice about once you apply this and it's fairly wet is if you don't like what you just did, you can cover it up, do it again, and I've done that many a times. And then I'll just start, so here's the surface. And you can kind of see how deep it is. Right there.
This thing. Frosting the cake.
Yeah. And then I just start playing around with it. Like for this thing, I just do a lot of pulls. And every time I come through, I'm gonna have excess on it. If I come back again, it may ruin the top as it goes on there, so I'm gonna wipe it off. What I didn't pull out, what I usually have is like a sponge as well. But if I'm working a vessel like this, I end up just kind of scraping with my finger. And you'll see when I start to work this one, kind of keeping it clean, but if it starts to dry up, I will push this into a sponge and just wipe it off. So as I start to apply or scrape through, I want that edge, so I'm not going to go directly right against it. And you can start to see that edge there. And, you know, that's the kind of thing that you'll get these lines. So I'm not even wiping away. If you want, you can pass this around.
Do you want a sponge?
That would be great. Thank you. Thank you.
A wax sponge?
Yes, please. Any questions? Will I get this next one ready?
Can you add a color to your slip?
Yes.
What was the question?
Can you add a color to your slip?
We have a color slip. We have color slip. We have color slip with that, right?
That's
That's
great.
the same thing, right?
Yeah, you know, now that you say that, I'm gonna try one of these. Okay, so here's one of the wooden tools.
There we go. Thank you.
So figure out what I want to put this. So that's just a chunk of wood. And I like when it's almost like stucco or plaster.
That's nice.
And let's say I mess it up. I didn't like what I did. I can come back in here. I'm really good and just hit the one area, especially if I'm doing it real kind of free form. Okay, so I fixed that bottom corner I didn't like. Now I'll just come back and knock it back down again.
Do you use all sorts of clay or certain clays?
I primarily work with WSO and the dark brown. Any clay should work. I haven't worked with porcelain. I don't know if that would cause any problems working with it, or I wouldn't think so. Sometimes I have an idea of what I want to do and I start to put the slip on, and as I brush it on I realize, well, I like what I'm already doing, and I end up changing what I'm going to do, or I leave it alone. I was having problems with one and I kept retouching up and kept fixing it, and it started to dry out, and as I worked it, it started to feather more, and I liked it, so I stayed with it, and I just kept working over and over. As I spun it around, I just worked, and it dried and it dried, and then it would kind of cake and flake more and more and more, and it started to take on a different shape or design that I hadn't anticipated. Oh, it's probably working its way around. That's another piece of wood that. Yeah, not much different from this. Yeah, that's. Do one more.
Anybody not see this one? They don't want it. Okay.
You done with them?
Welcome back.
find any difference if you raku fire, having done this?
Not really. Once you bisque fire it, I mean, it's in the state it's going to be, and I haven't noticed any difference. I mean, it's giving you whatever edge you're going to have on it, and depending on the glaze. I mean, raku doesn't tend to run much. I don't know, Bobby, have you done anything with raku that has run? It's
Not a lot. Some every once in a while, if it's put on too thick, the glaze will run, but not often.
Yeah, for me, I like when it breaks. I do like using glazes that break more, although I have a couple pieces that are more raku, and this one, because of the splatter, it's a little harder to see. But any of the glaze that will run, that's a clear. We'll catch the edge.
Dark brown? This is dark brown?
Yeah.
Oh. Wow.
That's good to know.
How thick have you put that on? Like, I mean, really thick? Have you ever done really thick?
No more than a 1/4 inch. But I mean, and I've done things where I'll come in and like play around with it like this. You know, you start to get different.
Oh, how'd you do that?
That's cute.
I took my eyes off, I was writing a note.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do it again.
Rewind.
Let me try it again.
This is interesting. Yeah.
I've done the same thing like with a wet sponge. Let me try that on half of this. Should I just do it this way? It's actually not sticking, so it's making more of these dents, but there it goes a little bit. Yeah, that was stuck on there. You can probably get a lot of this at Home Depot, right? Your sponges and
That's like plastic the wall.
yeah. Well, it didn't quite stick as much, but you know, look, it's all different kind of. So, just for your suggestion, I'm gonna let's see what happens here.
Let's do it. This one's been true.
Maybe I'll take this.
Yeah.
You can always work with like a little spray gun. If you feel like it's drying up and you're working it on and it's taking too long, or you've worked it, you can just come in and spray it a few times and let it absorb that water and soften back up. See what happens.
More slip.
Okay, watch
What
this.
is that, underglaze?
No, it's just slip with color added
Oh,
to it.
Mason's thing?
Okay, let's give this a shot. What's it doing? Is it falling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Use underglaze coloring.
Yeah, if not, if you don't.
Did you buy the slip with the color in it, or did you make that?
No, this is ours back there.
Oh, okay.
So I just ran the rib through it, just for another effect.
I think in cooking, that's called feathering, isn't it? Feathering? When you do icing.
Oh, I see. Oh.
Could you use that colored slip just on the leather hard clay, or do you have to put it on that layer of slip that you?
You could go right on leather hard clay, I believe, yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and do up this vessel. I wanted to show at least two edges, kind of what I do to bring it all together. When I apply it and work the slip off, I need some space here so I can pull the tool all the way through and clean it all the way off. So no different than we were just talking about. I'm going to put about an 1/8 inch on here.
Is that like a grapefruit knife or something?
No, it's just a little like paint palette
Palette.
knife. You know, flexible. I've even used it to create edges. When I work with the rib, I can get more on, but then it just really starts getting all over my hands. And sometimes I like the palette knife a little bit more, better control. But when I come in at the inside, it's hard to get in here, so sometimes the
icing palette knife. We didn't own one.
yeah, I should look at that. So I'm just caking it on.
One tip I can definitely see is you really have to have your slip like peanut butter.
Yeah, like a thin or creamier peanut butter. As I said, I've had it get dry on me and kind of cause problems where I just have to scrape it all off and start again. Yeah, sometimes I'm in not say a rush, but I'm trying to get this on and work the next side, and I just quickly go through and I'm like, well, wait a minute, I like that. So
Yeah.
I didn't stop. Oh, one other thing I wanted to point out too is when you've got vessels, you've got indentations, dents. I mean, you can see where I kind of patched it to keep it square up here towards the top. If I've got chunks in it, I just put a couple of chunks in there. It doesn't matter. You're gonna cover it up. So you don't have to kick yourself for having a perfect vessel because you can cover up your work.
What's your formula for the slip?
Just water and clay, and I just kind of keep working it with a stick until I get it.
Add anything to the water?
No, we were talking about that earlier about whether I use distilled water or add vinegar, and I haven't done that. I haven't had an issue with it cracking or peeling away from my structure. One thing I notice when I apply this is I seem to get it thinner in the edge as I pull my tool away, so I try to come back like on an angle here and scrape it off and let it come on thick, and then just knock it back down again, just to make sure I've got it all the way along the edges.
I think this is what they put to smooth the ceilings.
Stucco.
It's slip.
Yeah.
No, it is.
It's actually clay.
Yeah. No, it's clay.
It
Yeah, it's clay.
is?
I mean, it is place too heavy.
That's plaster.
Bad now. That's what all the painters are offering people.
Oh, then you can get acrylic seals.
Usually when I'm working a larger vessel, something like this, I would apply one side and do my texture work, spin it and go at the next one, rather than let go this far, putting 3 at once. Okay, we'll give this a
Do you worry about leaving air bubbles in there?
shot. Yeah, you know, I probably have trapped air and haven't had an issue. I try to work it, once I get it on, kind of push it down. And you can see, like right there, those two. And some of those will come out in the vessel and I'll see those little gaps. I kind of like the imperfections. But if you're talking about trapping air and worrying about exploding, I haven't had that issue. And I know, talking with Ben and others, I think he'll tell you that water is the biggest culprit for exploding, not air. Letting this dry out.
Has a lot of water in there too.
Yeah, but if it completely dries out, gets bone dry, you'll probably have less of an issue. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just do this. So I try to keep it even. I'm gonna push in to get a scrape, and I probably hold it at maybe a 30-degree angle. So I'm removing material, but I want it to push out on the side and create that edge. And I don't push so hard that I'm getting down to my original piece. So it's gonna float somewhat. See, I even missed down here, and I've come, like, if I didn't drag it up right, I didn't start on the bottom, I can come back here and go right through it again. Or I didn't close those. So even going through multiple times, if you want it really clean, you can go, a little slower and make sure you're methodical and come across. But I messed up, so I went ahead and just did them over and over. See, this is drying already on this side. I can hear it. Okay, so one thing I wanted to show you when I create, I do a lot of rectangular hand-built pieces. So I've got this edge where the slip is just kind of pushed together, and what do you do with that? I tend to build, when I build the vessel, I've already covered it up. I have kind of a beveled edge here. It's really hard to hold a perfect 90 and make it look, clean without some wave in it. I tend to come in on a 45 and just drag my palette knife across, and I put this, eighth inch wide bevel, and any imperfection on those two walls it just seems to take it right out. It's just another method of covering up my shoddy work. I mean, you can see some of the bevels on top, but getting back to, so I've got two sides done. I'll come in with the tool, and I'm gonna go back in and scrape at that 45-degree angle and just take off that excess material and kind of blend the two sides together in that corner. As I come up, I'm going to start to drag the tool away because it's collecting some of that excess slip. And if I don't, it'll just start to build up, and then it sometimes will cake back onto my piece. It's kind of hard to do. But I'll sort of go up and just pull the knife away. So what I've done is cleaned up that edge. I like that kind of sharper or beveled edge, really. And same thing on the bottom and top. I can come in here and it'll push some excess material down, but I like that edge to it. Try to do it so you can see it. So you can see I pushed some of that top down, but that imperfection will happen all over as I work my way around the vessel. If I don't like it, I can come back, like I said, cover it up, come in with a different tool and try something different. You could even do that. Yeah, geometric pattern, whatever you want.
Now, if you, where we're going at, you say, this just isn't working, I wanna take all the slip off and start over, how would you do that?
With the rib or this knife, yeah, if I didn't like it. Just cut it right back off, can add some water, redo it. See, now it's hard to get in here without my fingers, so.
Use that frosting knife, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, I get a lot of material. There is a consideration when you build, whether you throw it or you build your vessel, how thick you want to work it. There it is. Like these square ones, when I run it through there, I'm going a little under a 1/4 inch because I know I'm going to add more material here. So if I've got an 1/8 inch and then I add another 8, even though I'm scraping a lot off, you know, we're starting to get about a 1/4 inch thick on the piece. So I don't want to get too thick in that, and they get heavy. I mean, you can pick up some of these pieces. So I try to go a little thinner on the walls that I'm building, knowing that the slip's going to come on and add some thickness to it. But, you know, there, I do it right off that. I can come back in and, you know, try it again, something different. See, the more it dries, the more it gets that sticky where as I lift the tool away, it really sticks to it. Because now it's getting really sticky.
Can you spray some water on it?
Yeah, yeah, I mentioned that earlier. If you want to do that, if it's drying out a little bit and you haven't worked it, you can hit it with water. Just be a little conservative on it. You don't want to over soak it. Okay. I wanted to try this experiment on the wheel here. Good idea. So we've all seen stuff on YouTube and it looks easy enough, so see how this goes.
Everything looks easy on YouTube.
I played around with one last week and I had kind of mixed results, and I realized that the various slips that I had were different consistencies. So some were a little runnier than others, and it didn't come out as evenly as I had hoped. So I tried to add a little bit of liquid clay and
Do those tell you what clay they were made with in the bottles?
No,
You made the box.
I made the
You
bottles,
made
but I used some of the colored slip we have over there, and I'm not sure what it was. I thought it was WSO, but I couldn't tell you for sure.
Most of them.
Not necessarily. Not all of them.
So I'm going to try to get a thick little bead. Really running the black, I think. Yeah, they were hot in the car too, so it didn't help. It's gonna work. can see where I'm going to go with this.
I saw the other one that you did, and the fact that it dripped so much really added to it as far as I was concerned.
Well, that's what I want, so hopefully that's. It was just real inconsistent. But you know, again, it's something you got to play around with until you get what you like.
Spin it real fast.
These will fall out.
Be like this, spin it.
There's a, I'll say it's a quote, but it's a line that David Bowie said in an interview that I always liked. He talked about artists doing their best work, and that when they get pressured to doing something that's commercial, it tends to not be their best work. He talks about you've got to go out in the deep end, and just when you're just not touching the ground and you challenge yourself, that's when you do your best work. So I would encourage everyone to, you've got to experiment, do something beyond what you think you can do.
Anybody who dyes their hair, I think those squirt bottles that they have works.
Bob has been experimenting with the raku firing. Is coming up with some really beautiful stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah, something you never thought you would do or could do or didn't even consider.
That is pretty cool.
I'm gonna ruin it right now. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Quite
Very cool. Very cool. Nice.
Like you said, Randy, I thought you were gonna spin it really
The
hard.
audience.
Is it greenware?
Yes, yes.
So then, would you glaze it later? With
Um,
something else, or just leave it?
I don't know. Clear.
Clear, yeah, I think that's the only thing I would do is to clear over it. What else?
Very nice.
I'm sure I covered everything I wanted to talk about. Well, yeah, as I mentioned earlier about once the piece is done, have it on something that you know you can move, like even this one's going to be difficult. But this was an experiment, so I'm not as concerned, but I have a small spinning wheel like this at home, and what I tend to do is when I'm ready to do my texturing, I'll have a small wear board. I'll come in and do all my texture work knowing that when I'm done, I don't have to touch it and put it somewhere. As I mentioned earlier, texture you just did here, so you really can't put a bag, it's just got to air dry. I'm sorry, Pat, go ahead.
Oh, just,
Texture?
so, did that require a special technique, or are you just lifting it?
It's more of just kind of coming and scraping and lifting it out. So I did that with this little chunk of wood that's been one of my favorites. I mean, if you get, see how, I don't know if you can see how deep that went, but I mean, it sinks in a good 1/8 inch and I just pull back out. So when I get an edge like you're seeing, I won't go on top of it, I'll go in front of it and try to save some of those edges. Where I just join those three together.
It'd be helpful to draw this on a damper or wooden.
Yeah. So as I was showing to that side, once I do a scrape, I'll dig in and come back out. When I come in for that second one, I want to leave that lip. I'm going to go right underneath it, so I can get some of that those little sharp edges. If that's what I'm looking for. If I don't like it, I can go right back through it. Or yeah, if you don't leave that, you start to kind of lose the definition of what you're doing. You have to leave a little bit.
This blue vase here, is this color slip?
No, that's raccoon. But it was no different than this vessel, and I just did the sweeping up, and then I just did a raku finish. Other questions?
Do you ever put faces in them?
No, I haven't done that yet. Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people do some beautiful work, very detailed carving. I don't have the skill for that, like artistry, to do something, and if I mess up, I'm trying to fill it in and let it dry, hoping it'll patch up. This is very forgiving, which is nice about it. You don't like it, you just, if I scrape in, that's it. I gotta really work at covering it up and fixing it. This is so easy to scrape off and start again. Because it's still wet, and like, nope, I don't like that. Cover it up, do it again.
It's almost painterly.
That's all I have.